views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Open, the one and only show that opens the Bronx and the rest of the world right to you. I'm your host, Daren, Jaime, and today we'll update you on what's happening in and around our borough as well as across New York City. Coming up on our show today, we talk about President Donald Trump and the possibility of impeachment. We'll discuss that with the editorial page editor of the New York Post, Michael Benjamin. He'll be with us talking about that and all that's going on in the world of politics. Plus, Bronx Congressman Richie Torres was amongst those in the Capitol when rioters stormed in on January the 6th. We'll have a very special interview with him. And then later, we'll talk about a coalition of local community organizations and residents that are aiming to take active steps in improving the community's health and well-being. And finally, we'll learn about a not-for-profit organization providing New York children and families with the skills, resources, hope, and opportunity to rise above adversity. So we encourage you to stay tuned because all this and much more is heading your way. Right now, we're officially open. And hello, everyone. You are watching Open, the live and interactive program, bringing the Bronx and New York City straight to you. We also want to welcome our viewers on Manhattan Neighborhood Network as Open is being broadcast live simultaneously on the MNN channel. You can also stay connected to us on all of our social media platforms at BronxNet TV. And of course, don't forget about our website, at bronxnet.org. Well, a lot has certainly gone on in the world, of course, in our nation, and really right here in our city over the course of the past week. Can't take you through everything, but we can take you through a few things with our Bronx updates. We start off with local news right here in the borough of the Bronx. Local leaders gathered together on the steps of Borough Hall to express support for a citywide peace-building commission. This following a year of dramatic spike in shootings citywide. Our BronxNet reporter Arlie Makoko brings us this story and has our details.
There is nothing we can define the pain of Brandon's mom and define her as because it is unnatural, unsettling, and never should happen.
Following a year that saw a dramatic spike in shootings citywide, leaders on the steps of Bronx Borough Hall, including Brooklyn Borough President and mayoral hopeful Eric Adams, expressed support for an initiative that looks to dramatically decrease street violence. Called the National Community Peace Building Commission, spearheaded by activist Sheikh Musa Drame, it was named in honor of 17-year-old star basketball player Brandon Hendricks, who was shot June 28th in the Morris Heights section. Also there, borough leaders, some candidates for borough president, including council members Fernando Cabrera and Vanessa Gibson.
If you give young people something different to do, you take the gun out of their hand and you offer them a job. The best social program that we can ever invest in. That's what this work is about.
A lot of the young people, what they're asking is plain and simple. They want a job. They want opportunity. They want a path to success.
Why is it that our kids are looking at each other and shooting at each other? We got to ask that question. What makes a African-American kid and a Latino kid look at each other and rather than talk it out, maybe fight, fist fight, but they want to go get a gun and kill?
National Community Peace Building Commission will be model after community board functioning. But rather than being political, it will be volunteer-driven, purely community-centered.
Leaders would also meet monthly, share drama to discuss crime prevention following a year hit by the pandemic and rallies coupled with a homicide rate that jumped by 41% when compared to 2019. Among those who tragically died was young Hendricks, who was on his way to St. John's University. Today, his mother continues to grieve.
His final word was, "Please call my mother. Please tell her I love her."
20-year-old Clifford Robin Tempora and aide to State Assembly member Natalia Fernandez, who grew up in the Bronx, agrees with the program, saying young people need mentoring.
I believe that there has to be more opportunities. There has to be a better support system. I believe that all of these people on the streets, it's up to us, whether you're 20, 25, 30, it's your responsibility to make sure that the next generation, the next young adults who are 15, 14, 16, they are safe.
Well, the good news for the organizers is that each of the leaders agreed to sign on to this program. It's a program that for the Bronx would mean 61 neighborhoods would be talking to each other and getting support around public safety. For BronxNet, this is Arlene Makoko.
And thank you, Arlene. Of course, we'll continue to follow that story as more details become available. In other news, we step now to city council candidates. They attended an open New York public forum on the creation of legalized accessory dwelling units throughout our city. BronxNet reporter Kibben Aline brings us the details on this particular matter.
Organization and all-volunteer group Open New York held a forum with city council candidates to discuss efforts towards combating the housing affordability crisis.
The people elected in June and November, we're going to determine the next 10 years of this city. And the next 10 years of this city needs to be one where we have abundant housing.
Candidates expressed one solution being the legalization and creation of safe accessory dwelling units. These units are additional rooms such as a basement or garage occupied as a residential space on the same lot as a primary residence.
In New York City, I should say, our conversation is mostly centered around our wealth of basement apartments. And when we talk about that, a lot of the units we're talking about are in the shadow market. They're technically illegal.
You just see this reality that no matter what the laws are, right, no matter what is on the books, people will be working to try to figure out a way to live.
In March of 2019, the mayor's office launched a basement apartment conversion pilot program, but the program has since been on hiatus with budget cuts. City Council candidate for District 14, Pirina Sanchez, says the presence of legal ADUs and basement conversions offer protection to vulnerable tenants who otherwise would often live in poor conditions.
You know, folks are living with, windows that are smaller than my hand. We can bring dignity to the lives of tenants who are already living in these places who right now cannot call 311 and complain about the status of their accessory dwelling unit, or whatever they call it, because if they do, they get threatened with eviction.
Open New York member and moderator for the evening, Alex Schreienbeck, details what they believe is the most effective change that needs to be made on a city level to support the creation of legal ADUs.
The most effective way of doing this is probably going to be the city creating a whole new sort of regime that cuts through the rest of the zoning and building and maintenance codes. Just tailor the rules to ADUs and say the other rules don't apply.
The forum offered more ideas towards changes that support safe accessory dwelling units. To see the full conference, visit the link below. Reporting for BronxNet, Kibben Aline.
And thank you, Kibben. That's all the time we have for our Bronx updates. We've got a good show coming up ahead for you, so stay with us. Opal will return right after this.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community, and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting
to the new reality.
Reporting from Bronx, this is Andrea.
And welcome back. Last week, rioters stormed the United States Capitol in support of United States President Donald Trump's attempt to overturn defeat in the November 2020 presidential election. This after breaching multiple police perimeters. They occupied, vandalized, and ransacked parts of the building for several hours. The insurrection led to the evacuation and lockdown of the Capitol building and disrupted a joint session of Congress assembled to count the electoral votes and formalize President-elect Joe Biden's election victory. Joining us now to share more about the latest, including the possible impeachment of President Trump, is Associate Editorial Page Editor at the New York Post, Michael Benjamin. And Mike, good to have you on.
Saying thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Let's get right at it. When we talk about what you saw last week, first of all, your thoughts.
Very discouraging. I actually spent the whole day not even watching the news. It wasn't until like later in the afternoon after seeing stuff on Twitter that I finally turned on my TV and then saw what was going on. You know, it's obvious that the President of the United States, Donald Trump, had egged on and encouraged his supporters to go after the Capitol, to go to the Capitol and try to intimidate Congress into, disavowing the Electoral College result and install him as the next president. It was truly, disgusting and dissatisfying, and it was a real danger to members of Congress, particularly Republicans who were on the floor of both the House and the Senate arguing to not count the votes from what they said were disputed states that had election fraud and election irregularities that their own Republican election officials in those states said was untrue and certified the votes as correct, and that Biden-Harris was the winning ticket.
Yeah. When we look right now, based on the insurrection and the sedition, let's talk about where we are today. There is calls for on the part of the Democrats in the House to actually move and introduce the articles of impeachment for the President of the United States. Some people saying that they'll introduce it and bring it back later on in the Senate. They don't have to bring it away right away. But talk to us about if the president do you see the president being impeached a second time?
Democrats seem intent on doing it. I'm not quite sure exactly what the purpose of that would be, other than to exact some level of, revenge against him and to embarrass him and his party. The Democrats have complete control of the House. They could get the votes that they need, at least 218 votes for articles of impeachment and to impeach him. But the Senate is not going to reconvene to hold a trial. And by the time the Senate does reconvene, it'll be the 20th, and we'll have a brand new president. I'm not quite sure exactly what impeaching him would do, other than to, tarnish his already tarnished legacy as a 45th president of the United States.
Well, there's things that are being said, such as, he loses Secret Service protection if it is. He can't run again for president of the United States. Things such as that if he's impeached a second time. And some Democrats feel as though that's important, that you don't have any bit of presidency left after you get out of office.
I guess that's one way of doing it. I'm not sure if I particularly agree with that, or that their rationale is correct. I haven't really read everything to say that a second impeachment would disqualify him from the presidency. I don't see him running in 2024. Even if he did run, I don't see him winning. The Republican Party is backpedaling as fast as they can from him. Yes, he has some diehard supporters, but by the time you get to 2022 and 2024, Donald Trump will be in the rearview mirror, and given his personality and his volatility, I don't see him becoming any less of a divider than he is now. And I think the party needs to rebuild their brand, and they need to get away from the Trump thinking, at least his level of violent populism.
Right. Where do you see things going now with the Democrats having both the House and the Senate? And of course, we know that with the tie in the Senate seats, Vice President Kamala Harris will be casting that deciding vote. Where do we see things happening, and what can we predict happening immediately as soon as Biden's inaugurated?
Well, the president-elect, the next president, 46th president of the United States, Joseph R. Biden, he wants to focus on making sure we can defeat COVID-19, getting Americans vaccinated, getting our economy restarted and back and running again, people back to work, reducing the high levels of unemployment, creating new jobs, creating new industries, having the opportunity to do that. And he's going to need the support of Republicans in both the House and the Senate to get it done. One of the things we haven't talked about is that during Trump's entire 4 years, he really hasn't had an agenda. He hasn't had a legislative agenda that was passed. He talked about building a wall. He was always, every week, he was flashing new executive orders. Executive orders are only as good as the ink that's on the paper and the term of your presidency. Every executive order he signed can be undone by President Biden. So he has no legislative heritage other than the legislation of First Step, which allowed persons who had federal convictions to be pardoned to get out and to restart their lives by having parts of their record expunged. That was a good first step for him and for the nation. That needs to sort of continue for folks who have criminal records and federal felonies and maybe state felonies too, to be able to get their lives back in order because they made a mistake and they ought to be given a chance to to rehabilitate and to get back into normal society and be able to take care of themselves and their families. But that's the only thing I could point to as a Trump accomplishment in his 4 years.
Yeah, give me a little bit too about this because I want to ask the question about the appointments. We know Merrick Garland will be the pick that's going to be Attorney General. What more can we make for what's going to be happening with the president's cabinet? What can we kind of determine based on these appointments that we've seen?
Well, one thing I wanted to point out is that during the Obama administration, during his 8 years, people complained that he didn't have a lot of black and brown faces heading departments. And I always responded to my friends and others, look at who he's appointing to the undersecretary spots, the assistant secretary spots. Those are the folks who are going to be in the government over the next 25 years. And as you look at the folks who Biden has chosen to be his top people, many of them were these undersecretaries, these assistant secretaries under the Obama administration, who are now going to lead major departments and are going to, make the government look a lot more like us and be able to look more like America, having more people of color, various religious groups as well, but be more representative and sort of pushing forward an agenda that's good for all Americans. Biden's first task is to deal with the COVID-19 crisis and then working bipartisanly to overcome our division. It would be pointless for him to continue to try to move forward with an agenda, legislative agenda, if he can't get the country behind him. We forget, yes, Biden got 80 million votes. The president got 72 million, which tells you there are Americans who are supporting him. You need to bring them into the fold to understand that it wasn't about Trump. It's about policies that make Americans better. And if white Americans and others have some level of economic anxiety, you need to deal with that and to help them and others, everyone, get back to work and not have to worry about how they're going to feed their family or that some other group is going to come in and take their jobs and displace them and make life more miserable for their children. We have to lift every American vote and begin to get people to feel better about who they are, what the government is going to do for them and all Americans, that no one is going to be placed ahead of someone else because of the color of their skin, the region that they live, or their political affiliation.
Talking about bipartisanship, I mean, obviously that's going to be the name of the game. You spoke to it earlier. Are you optimistic, given the fact of what we've seen here January the 6th, with this insurrection, that this will be the bridge to bipartisanship, or will we see things continue to be further scattered?
I think if Biden and Harris move forward over the next 6 months to focus on things that appeal to everyone and can't be pigeonholed as something that's woke or is progressive or is only Democrats helping Democrats, you can engage the entire nation behind a movement to get Americans back to work, to get the vaccines out, to begin to reduce some of the restrictions when it comes to here in New York, whether you can go to indoor dining, you can go to your gym, your children can have in-school classes, beginning to do those things that make people feel better about who they are and what's happening in their neighborhoods and in their hometowns and their ability to work. I think that's one way of moving things quickly that embraces everyone. And no one could say, well, he's only taking care of those people. He's taking care of all of us. He wants to make our nation better. I think he can do that with a bipartisan approach. I think Republicans who are moderates and who are appalled by what happened last Wednesday want to be in that coalition to turn things around. They don't want to continue things on the path that we're headed, because the path we're headed on looks to be one that's going to be violence filled. We don't want that, whether it's violence from the right wing loonies or it's violence from quote unquote Antifa. We can't afford to have that in our nation. We need to move forward as one United States, as taking care of everyone and making sure that moderates actually are leading the way. I mean, progressives and the left and the Democratic Party are going to be upset, but we can't move forward with a left agenda if it's going to be distorted and then used to further divide our nation. Because there are 72 million Americans who voted for Donald Trump, and a portion of them were in D.C. last Wednesday trying to create an insurrection and to overturn the results of the election.
Yeah, we got to leave it there, Mike. Thanks so much for joining us. Of course, you'll be back to dissect more as we move forward. There will definitely be more news in the world of politics. Mike Benjamin, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
All righty. We're taking a quick break. We'll be back with more shows. Stay with us. We'll return right after this. Welcome back. January 6, 2021 will go down as a day in history, a day when our democracy was shattered as rioters entered into the U.S. Capitol, breaking in, putting lawmakers, law enforcement, and staffers at risk. Our Bronx desk Gary Axelbank spoke to Congressman Richie Torres, who was a congressman in the Capitol the moment the rioters entered. And Gary brings us that interview right now.
Our guest today is Congressman Richie Torres of the 15th Congressional District, a very busy time in Washington, D.C., and we can't thank him enough for taking a few moments to be with us and talk to Bronx constituents. How are you, first of all? It's been a crazy first week as a freshman congressman. Maybe you can give us a little perspective.
I'm still coping with the trauma of it all. I'm still in shock that, a violent mob could so easily reach the Capitol and invade the Senate chamber and invade the office of Speaker Nancy Pelosi. I never thought as a newly sworn in member of Congress that I would live through a violent assault on the U.S. Capitol. So all of us are emotionally shaken by it, but thankfully we're safe, and hopefully we can translate the lessons learned into security improvements here at the Capitol.
Can you give us just a little description of what it was like, where you were, and what you thought as it unfolded on Wednesday afternoon?
Yeah, so every 4 years on January 6th, both the Senate and the House convene as a joint session to oversee the Electoral College vote count. It's the final vote count in the presidential election. The vice president serves as the presiding officer. So that took place on Wednesday at 1 p.m. It began at 1 p.m. Most members were waiting in their offices because we cannot simultaneously be on the House floor because of COVID restrictions. So at 1:30, I'm in my office waiting to vote when all of a sudden the U.S. Capitol Police storms into the office, telling me to immediately evacuate because of reports of a suspicious package, an apparent bomb threat. And the Capitol and the legislative buildings are all interconnected like a maze. And so I was left wandering for about an hour until the Capitol Police found me and then brought me to a secure location. And in the meantime, there were rioters who breached the Capitol, who invaded the Senate chamber, who even invaded the office of Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Windows and glasses were broken. An officer was bludgeoned to death. Another officer was nearly crushed to death. So the Capitol became a scene of chaos and confusion and violence and volatility.
Did you see any of it firsthand? Or now your office as a freshman, you're not in the main building? Or just did you see anything, or were you really shut away from a lot of it?
No, I was in the Cannon building, which was the first to be evacuated because of a bomb threat. And so I was experiencing firsthand, but I was not on the House floor when the rioters breached the Capitol. But all of it is interconnected.
What did you hear from colleagues? I realize they're new colleagues. It's like you get a new job and you start to meet people, because many of them you're quite familiar with anyway. Any worthwhile stories to relate that you heard from colleagues?
I had colleagues who were barricading themselves inside their offices in fear for their lives. You had rioters screaming that the vice president should be hanged. So I think the people are outraged that the president of the United States would instigate a violent mob to storm the Capitol in an attempt to derail the presidential vote count.
We should mention that this is being recorded on Monday, just after 12 noon. Things will be changing. People might see this at one time or another. And so I just wanted to set the time. So as I understand, the articles of impeachment have already been introduced by the speaker. Is that in fact true? And is that where we are at right now?
Not quite. We are moving in the direction of voting on articles of impeachment. We're first going to vote on a resolution calling on the vice president to invoke the 25th Amendment, which empowers him and a majority of the cabinet to remove the president from office. If the vice president refuses, then we will have no choice but to vote on articles of impeachment against the president of the United States.
There has been no word from the vice president, as we understood from watching from watching 60 Minutes last night. The Speaker of the House, Pelosi, said that they hadn't even heard back from the vice president. It's hard to say from this point, what he might or might not do. It certainly appears likely he would not go forward with the 25th Amendment. If, in fact, it's the articles of impeachment that are on the table, I'm presuming you would vote for it. Do you believe that this would be the kind of thing you'd want to see the House bring to the Senate right away? Or there's been a lot of talk about delaying, not to interfere with President Biden's agenda as he takes office on the 20th, and then maybe a month or two later or at some point in the future, send it over to the Senate? Do you have a preference of how this should go, if in fact articles of impeachment are what the House votes on?
There's no question that I'm going to vote for the articles of impeachment. And we have to act immediately to hold President Trump accountable. For me, the issue here is accountability. There has to be consequences for committing sedition against the United States Congress. The violent mob that Donald Trump unleashed on the US Capitol represents a violent assault on the separation of powers between Congress and the president. It represents a violent assault on the peaceful transfer of power from one president to the next. If striking at the core of our constitutional republic is not an impeachable offense, then what is the impeachment process for? This is a clear-cut case of presidential abuse of power and incitement of insurrection.
Would you recommend moving it through at this, like right away, to try and get it in before the inauguration, or even soon after, and then complicate the legislature's ability to deal with Joe Biden's agenda, as well as appointments, which of course are going to be necessary? Or do you think you'll have made the statement and it can wait to deliver to the Senate until a time when it...
I feel like we have an obligation to act immediately, not only to impeach, but to convict Donald Trump. And keep in mind that a House majority is required to impeach Donald Trump. A Senate supermajority is required to convict Donald Trump. And then once convicted, a Senate majority is required to disqualify Donald Trump from ever pursuing public office again.
So you would move to just keep...
we have no choice. The need to hold Donald Trump accountable is more important than politics.
You have not had time, I'm presuming, to make friends on the other side of the aisle yet. in your in your all of first week in the Congress. Have you gotten to talk to any Republican colleagues and get a sense of? I mean, I only see with the headlines that I see on television, and that there seems to be some pushback. They seem to be rooting for the vice president to take the onus off the legislature. Do you get a sense of where they're at right now?
You know, my confidence in most of my Republican colleagues has been shaken. Right? Anyone who attempted to overturn the results of our election, anyone who instigated a violent mob to storm the Capitol, has no business being a member of Congress. So I could care less about the opinion of a seditionist.
It occurs to me that you were the chair of the investigations committee long ago in the city council. You've moved 5 worlds ahead since then. I have to tell you, this is one man's opinion. I've not heard it anywhere, but it sure looks like this was an inside job. To not have the Capitol Police there, to have doors open. It seems clear that people who marauded the Capitol building had an idea of where to go, knew where some secret offices were. I mean, it just has all the earmarks. What do you recommend? Are we looking at a 9/11 and Warren Commission style investigation here? And boy, I bet your juices would be flowing to be part of that, given your background.
I agree with you. There needs to be a bicameral, bipartisan commission that investigates the security failures surrounding the siege on the Capitol. You know, I'm still in a state of shock that a violent mob could breach the Capitol, which should be one of the most guarded places on earth. Right? There was no heavy fencing securing the Capitol complex as there is in the White House. And the National Guard was not even on standby.
Seems remarkable.
The deployment of the National Guard was not authorized until 3 p.m. And the National Guard did not arrive until 5:40. And by then the situation had stabilized. But the Capitol Police was utterly overwhelmed and overrun by the rioters. There were thousands. There were about 1,400 Capitol Police officers versus 8,000 rioters. And I'm just shocked by the lack of planning and preparedness that went into protecting the United States Congress during the Electoral College vote count, which is the most important event in our democracy when it comes to the peaceful transfer of power.
Last question here. I've been thinking about legislation, maybe toughening domestic terrorism rules so that people who are arrested not only will get weapons charges and trespassing charges, that they could be more easily convicted on domestic terrorism. The other thing is taking a look at symbols of white supremacy and saying, you know what, we can't have that. Germany did it after World War II. Is that the kind of thing you would say, gee whiz, maybe it's time to do something like that?
Yes, I mean, we have to be careful about the laws we pass because if applied too broadly, those laws can do more harm than good. It seems to me that we have laws in place that allow us to hold domestic terrorists accountable. What we have failed to do is to monitor them properly, including within the ranks of law enforcement. You might remember that my final investigation in the city council uncovered that the NYPD's Equal Employment Commanding Officer was actually trafficking in bigotry on an online message board. And these message boards have thousands of officers from across the country who are trafficking in white supremacy. And we should be monitoring those message boards, and we should be uncovering the identity of those officers, and we should be filtering them out of the ranks of law enforcement. We have to be proactive in monitoring and in cracking down on white supremacy, including in the ranks of law enforcement. So for me, it's not about, we have the laws necessary for prosecuting them. We have to be more proactive in identifying and finding who these people are.
Congressman, I know you have a very busy day, so I'm going to let you go. We're going to wish you safety first. Please just be well. Let's have no more problems in the Capitol so that you can, do your job. And I know you're very serious about that. And also, if this is an indication of your accessibility as you go forward as a Congress member, everybody in the Bronx will benefit. And just to have the dialogue is just so important to all of us.
Look,
so we really appreciate it.
I just want to leave on one final note. You know, even when I leave the Bronx for Washington, D.C., the Bronx will never leave me. You know, I see it as my obligation to keep the people of the Bronx informed about what's happening in the federal government.
You can take the boy out of the Bronx, but you can't take the Bronx out of the boy. I'm looking forward to running into you in a deli on Allerton Avenue like we did a little while back. BronxNet Television really appreciates your time. Get back to work, and let's see if we can straighten things out and move things forward. Thank you so much.
Take care, Gary.
Richie Torres of the 15th Congressional District. Thank you.
And thank you, Gary. And I want to let you know here on BronxNet, continue to stay connected to us as we bring you more information as we move closer towards the inauguration. Of course, the impeachment possibly of President Donald Trump and any other news that's related in Washington, D.C. We're taking a quick break. We'll be back with more Open coming up right after this.
When taking public transportation, don't touch your phone. Carry hand sanitizer and use it immediately upon leaving the bus or train. Avoid touching your face. If someone is coughing or sneezing, move away. Wash your hands with soap and water as soon as possible. Limit contact with poles. If possible, avoid rush hour. Don't eat or drink on public transportation. Keep your bag off the floor or other surfaces. Avoid directly touching turnstiles. Stay up to date with the latest from your local health department and CDC.
And welcome back. The fallout for the COVID-19 pandemic continues. More people are unemployed and food insecurity has grown significantly. Nearly 37% of pantries and kitchens in New York were forced to turn people away, reduce their portion sizes, and limit their hours of operation due to a lack of resources. The Northwest Bronx Food Justice Project is a coalition of local community organizations and residents, and they're on a mission, taking an active, targeted steps towards improving the community's health and well-being by addressing nutrition literacy and the impact of food insecurity and limited access to affordable as well as fresh food. Joining us now to share a little bit more is the Deputy Director of Riverdale Senior Services, Andrea Cassidy. And Andrea, good to have you with us, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Daren, and thank you for having me.
Yes, we are hoping that it's going to be a happier new year. But as I said in the lead into this segment, you know, nearly 37% of people are really struggling with this issue with pantries. 7% of pantries having a hard time. Food insecurity is huge. And I know that there are organizations that are really rising up, trying to bridge that gap.
Exactly. You know, I thought, too, I would just give you a very quick intro about the Northwest Bronx Food Justice Project. We started about a year ago, formed a year ago, really to address the long-term and embedded inequalities in our neighborhood, mainly access to good and healthy and affordable fresh food, and really to help engage people in learning and in providing credible and relevant nutrition education. So that's, as you said, we formed a coalition, and we also formed a food justice team at that point in time. And that was in January of 2020. And then COVID hit and the situation became dire. So our intent was to get into the community and do some nutrition literacy. Well, that program went virtual, and we had to open an emergency food pantry in St. Stephen's United Methodist Church.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was about to say that the St. Stephen's had at that point in time prior to COVID had a just very small little pantry, and they were providing food for just a few. So after COVID hit, we pivoted quickly to open up that emergency food pantry. It's now serving over 700 people, and with a waiting list of about 300.
Yeah. And I know you see access to food as like an equity and a justice issue. Give us your thoughts on that and why you see it as such a major issue.
Well, it is, it really hits the neighborhood itself, because of this long-term inequities within the neighborhood. It's social, it's financial, it's racial, it's also health. So all of these impact a neighborhood. And when you don't have access to good food, and nutritious food, it really becomes an overriding issue all along. Health becomes an issue. People who don't have enough money to purchase food also are really forced to buy inferior food. So it really is an inequity issue.
Yeah, yeah. And when we look at this inequity issue, we talk about statistics, and the statistics are alarming. Is there any statistics or data that you can share with us that can give us a better insight into how bad things are?
Well, 30% of the people are living in poverty right now in our neighborhood. And it's an easy jump to say that if 30% of people are living in poverty, that they can't afford food. So that's one. About 16% are unemployed. 1 in 4 are food insecure. So food insecurity is certainly a huge issue. It's also, food insecurity also involves not eating the right kinds of food, because if you're in our neighborhood, for example, there are a lot of fast food places. So if you can purchase a fast food dinner for $1 or $2, that, and get a lot of food, as opposed to finding a place where there's fresh produce, and you don't get a lot of fresh produce. That is really is really what people are forced to do is a shame.
Yeah. Well, how's the project doing? Since I know you guys have been going for about a year now, give us a little bit about insight into the project. How do you feel the project is going so far?
So we formed a coalition, by the way, and I think that has been the strength of the project. You haven't mentioned the names of the coalition.
Okay.
Kingston Heights Community Center is a food pantry as well, and they are struggling to really provide. They provide, prior to COVID, they were feeding about 20 people per week, 20 families per week. They're now serving 200 families per day. So that also gives you an idea of how dire the situation is. So, and Out of Seed Shadows is involved with us. The Friendly Fridges people are involved in the coalition, St. Stephen's United Methodist Church, and of course, Riverdale Senior Services. So we are among the founding members of the coalition that are addressing this issue.
And so going forward, how can people participate in being an assistance to this? I mean, you got a lot of great work going on, and I know you do a lot of, you get a lot of volunteers and donations. How can people play a part in supporting the work?
So there are a number of ways. We have a website, a web page, and people can sign into that web page and say they would like to help. That's one way. Another way is donating to the Friendly Fridges that are the Friendly Fridge. There's a Friendly Fridge in the neighborhood. I know many people are aware of it. It's on 242nd Street. So people can donate to that. Certainly people can choose to volunteer. And I think that also people can leave a message on my answering machine if they would like to get involved. We certainly could use volunteers. That's another way to get involved. And financial donations are always great too.
Yeah, yeah. And how do you see things playing out? I mean, we're in the middle of the new year, and well, not the middle, just start of a new year. And as we're at the start of the new year, obviously we're coming out of some real tough times. But how do you see things playing out in the near future for pantries?
So for pantries, here is a challenge we have in our neighborhood. There are essentially 3 food pantries. Kingsbridge Heights Community Center is open 5 days a week. St. Stephen's can only be open 1 day per week because of access to food. There's food sources, and the Mediator is also a food pantry. So what we're looking to do in the coalition in the coming year or years is really to strengthen the availability of food pantries in our neighborhood. Our ultimate goal is to have a distribution center where we can accept and distribute food to the various food pantries within the neighborhood. That is an ongoing piece of work that we're involved in. And also the nutrition literacy, we find that it's very important to integrate literacy into programming. So that will continue, certainly while COVID is still raging, it will continue online and virtually, and it's different. Not everybody has a computer, by the way, so it's not easy to reach the folks during this time. The OSS, Outer Seed Shadows, actually, in partnership with BronxNet, was able to get a little TV show going, highlighting their work in the community gardens and also highlighting the work of our nutrition literacy program. So that's another way to get to the people, and we hope to do more of that during this year and integrate more into the pantry's nutrition education. People can go to our website and find hordes and hordes of information on nutrition education, the value of plant-based eating, and great videos that our nutritionist has put up. So really expanding what we do, growing what we do, and really to solidify the food pantries and the sourcing of food in our neighborhood. That's our goal for this coming year, basically.
We're hoping things get better. We know there's a lot of challenges out there, and particularly food suppliers, right? Really seeing food suppliers being able to donate and to get to these pantries, which has been a challenge. And I hope that things really get better. Andrea, we got to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us here on the show.
Thanks so much, Daren. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I want to let our viewers know that if you want more information, we're going to encourage you. And what you can do is you can go and visit their website, rssny.org /NW Bronx Food Justice, and follow them on Facebook and Twitter at NW Bronx Food. We encourage you to do that. And we also encourage you don't go anywhere, because Open will continue with more show coming up right after this. And welcome back to the show. Rising Ground is a not-for-profit organization that is providing children, adults, and families in need with the resources and skills they need to actually rise above adversity and positively direct their lives. The organization supports more than 25,000 children as well as adults and families in need each year, and is continuing to evolve in its services to meet the changing needs of New Yorkers. Here now to tell us more is the co-parenting facilitator of family foster care at Rising Ground. We've got Michele Favale, and thank you so much, Michele, for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
When we talk about foster care, obviously a much needed area. Talk to us a little about the work that Rising Ground does and the services that you provide.
Yeah, absolutely. So last year, we piloted a program, our co-parenting initiative program. And this program is really geared towards changing the culture of foster care. really giving a voice back to the parents and wanting them to be much more involved in the services that are offered throughout our agency. And the goal of this program was really to partner the parents and the foster parents together so that they could be a joint team in really helping us achieve permanency and quickly get the children back to the parents' care.
And when we talk about your services and the services that you provide, talk to us about families and the need of families. Do you find like post-COVID-19, the need for families and services has risen?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we are all going through this together and it's changed a lot, COVID-19. And so we absolutely are always in search of looking for new foster homes for people who really want to partner with us in being change makers and helpers in time of adversity. So, we know that foster care is not intended to be permanent. It is temporary. And we really we need foster parents to come on board with us and say, we want to help families and children through a time that's really difficult for them, and be a part of our agency in that role.
And when we look at the role of your agency, obviously you've got a lot of services that you do or that you're able to provide. I know one of those things is really catering towards parents and parents being able to help parents. So walk us through a little bit about how that works.
Yeah, so our newest initiative in parent supports is our Parent Supporting Parents initiative. It's brand new. And so what that is it is taking parents who have previous experience with foster care. They themselves have been through the system as a parent. And now they're on the opposite side of the table, per se, and they're able to become parent advocates. And there's lots of training and a lot of support that's given to them to then be able to turn around and take their experience and help further parents that are currently going through this. And it's a wonderful new initiative because we're really able to connect with our parents in such a deeper way because they have that shared experience. They can say, hey, I've been through this before and there's hope. It's very different for a parent to hear that message from someone who has walked those same paths and within those same shoes than it is for a case planner or a director or, anybody else in the agency to say it. So we're really, really excited about this initiative because we think that it's going to really help our parents achieve their goals and realize their potential faster because they have that support built in now from the very beginning of intake all the way through discharge.
Yeah, and the need for foster parents during a time like this. Talk to us about that because a lot of people say, well, with COVID-19, there isn't that great a need. And we've heard from you, the need is great. Talk to us about the need for for foster parents and how people could actually become.
Yeah, absolutely. Foster care is still here. There's still a need. There's still children that are in the system. And the need is really great. We want foster parents to come on board, as I had said previously, that are really looking to be a safe place for children temporarily, who are willing to join us in this way of looking differently at foster care. And it's a wonderful commitment. It's a great way to help the community, your community that you live in, whether all 5 boroughs we're in. So really a wonderful way to get in to help support children in New York City that are in need of homes. It's winter time right now, right? So we just really want to provide children a safe place. And the way to become a foster parent is great. I mean, you could go to our website, risingground.org, and it walks you through the steps, and you're then connected with a home finder who will walk you through. You get all the training through us. There's lots and lots of support services that are involved in that. So you're not just signing up and kind of on your own, but you're really signing up and a part of this agency. And then that's it. So
yeah. Well, get connected is what it is. Really, we want people to get connected. A lot has changed throughout the course of the day. We talked about foster parents, but I want to talk about social work as it is today too, right? Because how social work is today as compared to yesterday, the way that we know it, has dramatically changed. Give us an insight into social work today.
Yeah, so there's a lot that has been learned, especially through foster care. And I think that's what we're seeing is that there's such a need for various different services. And so what was looked at once in, now when we look at our social services and the need for social workers and the work that they do, they're really, they're taking on such a larger role than before, and really encompassing so many different elements. So much of our work is really rooted in trauma-focused, realizing that a lot of our kids are coming through the system with trauma. And so we're working with whole families. We're not just working with one individual, but we're working with children and their parents. We're working with multi-generational households at times, parents and foster parents. So it's really diversifying the entire need for to look at it in so many different ways, that there's not one solution to fix any situation that's happening, but we want to be equipped in many different ways to help the family in whatever they need at that time.
Yeah. And what do you find to be the greatest need of families right about now?
Right now, I think a lot of stability. Just really, if we look at just the past year with COVID, there's so much uncertainty. There's so much that we don't know what's happening, what's going on. We can look throughout, not just COVID, right? There's so many things this year that has happened that has altered our lives in so many ways. And I think the most important thing we need to is to look at community, to look to each other for that support. And figuring out, what do we need now? What do we need? What can we provide? Children need caring adults. So is that foster parents right now? Is that parents right now? How do they then communicate with one another to really support 100% the permanency and the need? So we might not be able to solve everything all at once, but if we could start with the very basics of what does stability look like for this family, for this child, and then grow from there.
So how can people get involved and how can people play a part in this?
Yeah, so again, the first, if you're really interested in foster care, again, one wonderful way is to become a foster parent. And that itself is a huge undertaking and a great, we're so gracious for our foster parents. The other way is to look at, what are your skills? What can you bring? Are there jobs out there that are available that speak to you in this way? Getting involved in any organization that is doing this kind of work, this groundbreaking work that's really rooted in supporting families.
That's what we want to tell people. If they want to get more involved, of course, your website is risingground.org, and people can get connected there. But before we leave, I'll give you the final word. Anything else that you'd like to share?
What else? We've covered so much, but I think just for our parents, our foster parents and the people, is to have hope that, this is amazing work, and we've learned so much in all the years of doing this. And we're just continuing to look to the future to grow and continue to better our services, better our support, and really just be there for one another. And that's really the root of that work.
Michele Favale, thank you so much for being with us here. risingground.org is the website. And of course, we want you to go ahead and visit their website if you're interested in finding out more information or becoming a foster parent. Michele, thank you again for joining us.
Very much.
All righty. Well, I want to let you know that we come to the end of our show today. I want to thank all of our guests for joining us, and most of all, you, the viewer, for tuning in. Now, if you missed any part of the show, you catch the recable cast. And then always, if you desire a brand new, fresh episode, come back on Friday with my girl, Rena Valentine. She'll be back with a brand new, fresh episode of Open, focusing on arts and entertainment, as well as keeping you updated with the latest in COVID-related happenings as well. For all of us here, I'm Daren Jaime saying take care, God bless, and most of all, keep this channel wide open.